YouTube star Jack Harries will appear in court this week after he protested outside an international petroleum conference in London, gluing his hands to the door of a hotel. He and 8 others from a climate change group called Extinction Rebellion were arrested for aggravated trespass and criminal damage. Jack Harries, who's 25, became well known through the YouTube channel he started with his twin brother called Jack's Gap, which has nearly 4 million subscribers. Extinction Rebellion was started at the end of 2018 with the aim, they say, of driving radical change through non-violent resistance. Jack has been explaining what motivated him to get involved with the movement.
As my work as a documentary filmmaker, I've spent the last 4 years making short films for YouTube. The first film I made that sort of set me onto the path that I'm on now was a short film where I travelled to Greenland to go and see the effects of glacial retreat, and that was with the WWF, the World Wildlife Foundation. And that trip sort of totally opened my eyes to the realities of climate change, which is obviously a huge issue at the moment. And since then I've had the opportunity to travel to Somaliland to go and cover drought, to the island of Kiribati in the South Pacific to cover sea level rise. And to put it simply, as a young person, I'm terrified for the state of my future. And so that's what's led me to do the work that I'm doing.
And we're looking at some of your filming now here. This is some of the footage that you have taken of glaciers melting and so on. Why were you specifically protesting at the Gas and Petroleum Conference?
Sure. So 2 weeks ago was the International Petroleum Conference in London, which is where all the biggest names in the gas and oil industry meet to get together, rub shoulders, discuss their future, their industry. This is an industry that have consistently put short-term gain and corporate profits over the health of our planet, over my future. We know that the temperature is rising in the planet, and this is caused by the burning of fossil fuels. The IPCC report states that we have to reduce gas and oil by 20% this year and by 55% by 2050. Meanwhile, ExxonMobil, for example, has said that it's going to increase gas and oil by 25% in 2025. So
it's up to governments, isn't it, to make sure those limits, those targets are met?
Sure, it's up to governments and CEOs and leaders of big corporations. And I think a lot of young people feel that the severity of the issue at hand is not being reflected by government, by policymakers, or by CEOs of large corporations. And so protesting is a way to make our voice heard, to sort of, if you think about it, around the world, scientists are sounding the alarm bells that there is an impending crisis, and we're not seeing this reflected in our policy or by CEOs who should have the responsibility to be investing in green energy and renewable sources.
Right. Did you want to get arrested at the protest the other week?
Not at all. I've never been arrested in my life before. It's never my intention to get arrested. I don't want a criminal record. I don't want to be caught up in the justice system. But it's got to the point where I feel like nothing else will make a difference. I'm scared that I'm not going to have a future, that my kids won't have a future, or they won't, certainly not the future that you've enjoyed and all the generations before us. And so I think a lot of young people feel that they have run out of options in order to make their voice heard, and that was why I took the action that I did.
This is footage filmed by your partner. I mean, one of the founders of Extinction Rebellion, Roger Hallam, says, emailing, writing letters, going on a march, it's no good. We need about 400 people to go to prison, maybe 2,000 to 3,000 people to get arrested. You achieved that. But you say that wasn't the aim.
It wasn't necessarily my aim to get arrested, but here we are now talking about climate change, and so if that's what it takes in order to elevate the conversation to where it needs to be, then that's something I'm prepared to do. I didn't enjoy being in a cell for 13 hours. I don't necessarily advocate for other people to go and get arrested, but unfortunately that's what it takes in order to elevate this conversation to where it needs to be. I mean, we're talking about a severe issue. We're talking about drought, forest fires, sea level rise, which may lead to, will lead to mass migration, poverty, disease. I mean, our future is looking apocalyptic, for use of a better word. And we have to be having this conversation now, and we have to be making change. And it's as though we're sort of sleepwalking into this crisis. And
there are many who will agree with you. Many watching right now who will agree with you. On the other hand, you're also using up police time and resources, which we know is scarce, when the police are stretched at the moment for all the reasons that we are discussing.
I understand that, and some people have expressed issues with Extinction Rebellion's tactics for getting in the way of people in causing traffic jams and taking up police systems. But the fact of the matter is that climate change is going to cause us a lot more inconvenience than that. And so I would rather that these things happen now and we try and tackle the issues before it becomes a much greater issue. It's going to put a lot more of a threat to our...
So the means to the end is worth it, even if it means taking up valuable police time and resources when they're trying to deal with knife crime and all the other things.
I mean, we're talking about the end of humanity as we know it. I mean,
so yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it, yeah. And I wish it wasn't. I wish that our government would enact change as we've asked for. I mean, protesters have been saying the same things for 20 years. My mum was a climate activist, and she was going out doing the same things when I was 13 years old. And so this is something that we've been trying to talk about for a long time, and nothing is working, and so we have to up the ante.
But the government has brought in targets, is achieving some of those targets, is changing our energy sources to renewable energy sources, is phasing out diesel and petrol cars. Stuff is being done. You've got to acknowledge that.
Stuff is being done, and I acknowledge that, but it is not being done nearly fast enough. So Extinction Rebellion has three main requests, and Extinction Rebellion is a group of everyday people who are desperately concerned for their future, and we're talking teachers, lawyers and scientists, and they've come together to form this group, and they have three main requests, and one is that the government are just honest about the state of the crisis we're in, which they're not entirely, and the media too.
But they're not they're not telling lies, are they?
Well, they're not talking about what we need to do.
Right, but that's not being dishonest, is it?
Sure.
That's not giving it as much attention as you would like.
Sure, but I mean, do you think that we're doing everything we can be doing around climate change in your own opinion?
Doesn't really matter what I think. You've just said the government's being dishonest, and I'm challenging that.
I didn't say they're being dishonest, I said they're not talking about the severity of the crisis.
You said they're not being honest.
They're not being honest about how bad it is and about what we should be doing. For example, many people should be adopting a plant-based diet. I don't see our government talking about that. That's absolutely crucial in order to cut carbon emissions. Scientists have said that we have 12 years left in order to stop an increase of 1.5 degrees, to go no higher than 1.5 degrees Celsius. If we go higher than that, then we're looking at seriously severe consequences, right? Scientists are telling us this, they're sounding the alarm, and we are not doing enough in order to curb those carbon emissions, not even nearly. At this point, we're going to overshoot it, and that will affect my future and my kids' future. And so, I don't want to be doing this, with all due respect. I don't particularly want to be here. Like any other young person, I have aspirations for my future, but I feel that I may not have a future, and that's why I'm taking the actions that I am today.
Why do you think there aren't more of you?
I think that many people are scared to speak out about the environmental crisis for fear of hypocrisy, and I totally understand that.
I mean, like Prince Harry was accused of being hypocritical last week, talking to young people about climate change and being kinder to the environment, but then he'd got a helicopter from wherever he'd got a helicopter from and to.
Sure, and I travel around in cars, I fly to go to these places to tell these stories, and so we're all complicit in this argument. But I think we have to move past blame. We have to agree that we're all totally complicit in this, and we can't point fingers at each other, because I think if you have to be a perfect environmentalist in order to have this conversation, then no one's going to be able to have the conversation, and we're not going to get anywhere, and I think that's why we've stalled so far up until now.
Shouldn't you lead by example, though?
Well, I am trying to lead by example. So personally, I've had a plant-based diet for 5 years. It's something I talk about online. I've never felt better for it. It's helped me cut down my carbon emissions. I've cut down my flights. I only try and travel when it's telling stories about the environment to try and create change. I've cut down my travel. I cycle as much as I can. So I do try and lead by change. But fundamentally, I think that young people around the world are leading by change. They are making drastic changes in their lives. But who we're not seeing lead by change is policymakers and the government. And that's who should be setting the example, and CEOs of large corporations.